So this is your first studio activity that I'm not going to be able to go through with you detailed in class. And so we're going to kind of go through it this way, and then I will be available via email and Q&A in class for you to be able to get some help and ask some questions about this activity if you run into any problems. I just kind of want to go through everything, so we're just going to go like top to bottom through this activity. The main objective is to kind of build off what we did in the library and give you a chance to come up with at least a good starting like plan to have some like broken down like research questions, some of what I call like search sentences, some like groups of keywords, not just for your big LOI, but for your also for each of your like little research questions. So you can kind of, tweak and veer away from this like as you get further into your research, but it at least gives you kind of a good search plan. So this activity is actually going to be due this coming Monday. So I get this highlighted. Monday the 4th at 11:59 p.m. So it's not a class day, but it is marked on your calendar. Mondays and Fridays, even though they're not class days, are often days that I'll give you until like midnight that day. Or I guess that night would be better to get the activity done and to get that in. Materials and submissions. So for this activity, you're going to have like a Google Doc or a Word document, preferably a Google Doc. And you're going to do everything in one document and submit one file when you get done. I'm going to just give you an overview of the kind of directions, like the gist, because it is kind of a scaffolded, multifaceted activity that you're going to be doing here. And the activity itself also includes screencasts, so you're going to be watching screencasts within a screencast, which makes it super fun and multi-layered. So the directions, you've got two main parts to this activity. So you can kind of see as I'm going down, we got part 1 is divided into 3 steps. And then part 2 is kind of a separate thing, and they're divided up this way because part 1, what you're going to be doing is part 1 is broken down into 3 steps, and then each step is going to include a video or a screencast that's going to help you like complete the work for that activity. So you'll watch the video and pause where you need to and record work that I'm asking you to do, like brainstorming, just like you would in class on your Google Doc. There's also, I'm going to highlight this, there's the entire activity. If you kind of want to see it or look up something like without having my voice or having to play a video, the whole like actual like presentation with all 3 parts is just kind of included at the bottom if you want to go there. So what you have at the end of part 1 is a kind of a list of research questions and keywords and things. So I want to go through part 1 first. So step 1, you're going to be working with your research questions. So you've got the presentation here. You're going to use it to kind of build a bigger list than what you had in the library, and kind of maybe edit the list that you have. So you should walk away with a few more specific like research questions. Maybe you get to edit your list a little bit. It's pretty easy. It also explains a little bit more about like the reasoning behind coming up with these kinds of research questions. And how you might think about using this kind of thinking in the future for like just as a general like research habit. Step 2 is more about keywords. So you came up with some keywords in the library just for your big LOI. So what you're going to be doing with step 2 is moving your keywords from your notebook or wherever you're working in the library into this Google Doc that you're working through for this activity. You're also going to take your list of research questions that you've been working on, and for each one you're going to come up with specific keywords just to get at that. Do you have questions about that? As you go through the video for that step, I'll kind of like explain it and walk you through it also. Step 3 is some tips just to kind of go back through your list and maybe consider like trying or adding something you hadn't thought of yet, or something to consider to help your search go a little bit better. And just kind of some tips that you could use in the future for research. And then some kind of reminders down here also before you kind of move on to part 2. So I'm going to come back up to part 2. Part 2 is where you're actually going to take the work that you just did. You're going to take your LOI and the keywords that you came up with in the library. You're going to take your research questions and the keywords we came up with for that. You're going to take it to Google and try out like using your keywords for 6 questions that you came up with to try to get 6 sources that are going to be, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here, they're going to be your first sources for your research. So research and record. You're going to look up information for 6 of the research questions using the keywords that you came up with. Oh goodness, I have a typo. I'll fix that. So you're going to record the following on your Google Doc. 1 useful source. You have to find 1. So let's say this was the example that I will use in one of the presentations is if I were wanting to find out more about like standardized testing and No Child Left Behind and kind of what the relationship there is, I might search standardized testing, No Child Left Behind. That's technically 2 because they're groups of words, 2 keywords. And then I'm not following my own rule there, which you'll see later because I didn't put the quotation marks around it. And I would just pick 1 from this list, so 1 source that looks useful, and then I would maybe go to a different set of keywords and try something else. So you're going to record 1 useful source for each of the 6 questions. That's it. For each one, you're going to write about 4 to 5 sentences for that source that's going to cover like underneath it. So you can just list this out like question, kind of a summary / reflection, kind of an overview that explains what kind of text this was. So was it a blog? Was it, were you reading a news article? Sorry, was it a TED Talk? Like what is it? What it's about. So just a quick like overview of like what the point or argument or purpose of this text was. And then also why you think it would be useful. So why did you pick that one for this question? What do you think you're going to get from it? How is it going to be helpful to you? Or is it going to help you understand or learn more about? And then you're going to list the specific keywords that you use to find that source. So the question, a little bit about that source that you found for it that you wanted to keep, and the keywords that you used to get it. And that's kind of how you're going to complete part 2. So when you end, you should have not just a plan like kind of to go forward with your research, but hopefully like some new habits and tips that you could use for future research, like personal or even for class. And then also actually 6 sources that might be useful for you that are going to help you start getting at some of those smaller questions. So we're also going to scroll down a little bit toward the bottom. Here's where just like the presentation is. But also I want you to notice assessment, and I'm going to go over that just a little bit with you. This is a little bit different. I think the class prep is usually marked out of 5. This studio activity is worth 10. There's a lot of work here. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a, like I guess like a weighted thing. I just have more things that I'm looking for. Again, like these points are just here to help me determine whether or not you get a complete on the activity, and kind of be clear with you about what I'm looking for. So you would normally have to get a 4.4 out of 5. So for this you have to get an 8.8 out of 10. And then if you got an incomplete, you'll be prompted to go back and complete it. So you have to have all of the steps, all the required materials. Your research questions and keywords that I'm seeing that you come up with should show that you've really kind of considered some actual different aspects of the issue and information, and possibly, I mean do show that you took into consideration some of those tips that were in that 3rd video in part 3. There's no content farms or other kind of sources with like red flags, like lots of ads, superficial information, no references, that kind of stuff. The sources that you've provided have hyperlinks so that I can access the 6 sources that you came up with. You have helpful descriptions, so your descriptions do cover like what kind of text it is, what it's about, why you think it would be helpful or useful for you, and your descriptions of sources are in your own words. Like you didn't copy and paste a summary, like you try to kind of explain and talk about the source, like what it's about and its usefulness kind of in your own words. So if you go down to your rubric, can't scroll down, I'm going to make this window and kind of move the part of the screen you're able to see. So you have this kind of broken down into 10 points. I know this is weird, I'm going to move my face too. Um, so we have all the steps are complete, research questions and keywords. So it does show consideration for those tips that I went over in part 3. And they're kind of designed to get at different kind of types of info and parts of the issue. No red flags. All sources in part 2 have hyperlinks. Descriptions of sources in part 2 are paraphrased. They are 4 to 5 sentences long, which is listed in your directions for that activity. And sources in part 2 are source descriptions in part 2 are complete. So that means that you're addressing like what kind of text it is, what it's about, and why you think this would be useful. You can see where the point value is for each of these. So that's it. That's the whole activity. I'm just going to scroll back up to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and publish it so you're seeing it just as I complete this video. And move my face back down here. So again, you're welcome to send me emails. You are welcome to ask me questions in class. I'll probably do a little bit of Q&A at the beginning of class on Thursday, just to make sure that everybody's kind of clear about how this activity works. Okay. So if you have any